This video is sponsored by 1440. Tired of biased news stories? 1440 has you covered. Check out 1440, the fastest way to an impartial point of view. The team at 1440 scours over 100 sources ranging from culture and science to sports and politics to create a single email that gets you all caught up on the day's events in 5 minutes. According to Gallup, 51% of Americans can't name a news source that reports the news objectively. 1440 has everything you need to be aware of for the day. And most importantly, it simplifies your life. It's 100% free, so sign up for 1440 using the link in the description. And now, let's see what Grant has to say.
So my friends, China has become an expert in building cities from scratch. Cities, in many cases, it's true, end up empty, or with occupancy rates far below those initially estimated. In the rest of the world, they are known as China's ghost towns. But no, we are not going to go there in this video, because we've already told you about them several times before. In this video, we will talk about the rise of one of Xi Jinping's own personal projects. A project that the Chinese president hopes will become a shining example of the future development model for the whole country. A change of paradigm where the government, the state, and Xi himself want to play a more leading role in the development of the territory and the local networks that make up the economic and social fabric, contrary to what has been done so far. But my friends, far from the market criteria that define the evolution of the so-called special economic zones, as for example the well-known cases of Xiong'an or the Pudong district in Shanghai, this new development that we are going to look at today is completely different. I am referring to the new area of Xiong'an, a project that is already underway and that aims to become the megacity of the 21st century. A new city that will occupy 3 rural counties, Rongsheng, Zhongzhang, and Yanxin in Hebei province. But that's just the beginning. Although the project estimates that in its first phase, this city will occupy 100 square kilometers, the intention is that in the medium term, its size will extend to 2,000 kilometers squared. To give you an idea, that is almost 3 times more than the entire area of New York City. Located near Beijing, but in a much less developed area and one with serious pollution problems, Xiong'an aims to become the most technological, best connected, and most environmentally sustainable city in China by 2035. With a master plan that takes into account several phases of development, reaching until 2050, the investment that the Chinese government has committed to this new urban space is stratospheric. According to Morgan Stanley's estimates, we are talking about a budget of between $170 and $300 billion, of which approximately half will be used to provide this new metropolis with ultra-modern infrastructure. The idea is that Xiong'an will complete a strategic triangle from an economic point of view. The city will be located about 100 kilometers from both Beijing and Tianjin, an important port and industrial city. In addition, it would be connected to the new Beijing airport, getting there in just 20 minutes, and be only half an hour from Beijing city centre thanks to a high-speed train. With these strategic ambitions, and because of the enormous challenge it represents, many analysts and experts have compared this project to the cases of Shenzhen, which was promoted by President Deng Xiaoping in the 1980s, and the Pudong district in Shanghai, which was promoted by Jiang Zemin in the 1990s.
Madame the President, I'm sorry to say that. Merci beaucoup.
In fact, it was precisely the establishment of these two special economic areas that laid the foundation of modern China, a China that is open to the market and to the world. However, my friends, Xi Jinping's pet project doesn't really resemble either of his predecessors. What Xi Jinping is trying to do here is just the opposite, to show that a new socialist China is possible, firmly led by the Chinese Communist Party. A city where the most important thing is not market-orientated economic growth, but the state itself. But hold on. Can a project that does not put private initiative first be successful? What can be learned from past experiences? Will Xiong'an be a success or a failure? Before answering these questions, we will take a closer look at Shenzhen, the light that illuminated the dawn of the Asian giant. The first successful large-scale experiment that changed the Chinese model forever. But before we get started, you should probably check out our other channel, newly launched Visual Academy. It covers all the most interesting people, places, and periods in history. It's got fantastic animation, and it's voiced by a very handsome sounding guy. You should check it out. But now, let's get cracking.
The symbol of the Deng Xiaoping revolution.
So my friends, when we are talking about the phenomenal transformation of China, in most cases we are not really aware of the dizzying speed with which it occurred, nor what the starting point was. You see, in the late 1970s, then Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping was warned that food production and industry levels were rapidly declining. There was a risk that a scenario similar to the Great Chinese Famine that killed millions of people between 1959 and 1961 would be repeated. For this reason, Deng Xiaoping, a leader who had already belonged to the reformist wing of the government in the Mao era, decided to try his luck with a new economic system that started in a small and poor fishing village of barely 30,000 inhabitants that was attached to Hong Kong. We are talking, of course, about Xiong'an. There, in Guangdong province, the Chinese government established the first special economic zones in their history, and the first space in mainland China where private investment and business were allowed in the modern era. In fact, looking at it from the present, we can say that this special economic area was the first stone in the foundation of the new China. To give you an idea, that small fishing village of barely 3 kilometers squared grew and grew and grew to become a giant with 12 million inhabitants, 2,000 square kilometers of surface area, and a GDP equivalent to that of all of Israel, or a quarter of that of all of Spain. With a historical average annual growth of more than 20% and more than $30,000 of GDP per capita, from an economic point of view, Xiong'an is already at the level of some of the most developed countries in the world. So much so that in the 4 decades since this special economic area was established, Xiong'an's wealth has increased 10,000 fold. Yeah, you heard that correctly. By 10,000 times in just 40 years. It is not surprising, therefore, that this has been precisely the engine of the new China that we know today, and the place that has seen the birth of companies as well known as Huawei, Tencent, or ZTE. Or that it was, out of interest, the first destination that Xi Jinping visited when he started his job as General Secretary of the party in 2012.
Echoes of Deng Xiaoping as Xi Jinping heads to Shenzhen on first inspection trip, SCMP.
In fact, this metropolis is home to some 70,000 technology companies, which means that roughly 5% of Xiong'an's GDP goes to research and development. However, behind these crazy figures, there is more than just a special economic zone. You see, the location chosen for what was one of the first capitalist zones in China, right beside Hong Kong and Macau, was by no means a coincidence. In 1979, Hong Kong and Macau were two much richer and more developed territories than the rest of mainland China, and the differences between Shenzhen and neighbouring Guangzhou were radical. Precisely because of this, the choice of the small cities of Shenzhen, Shantou and Zhuhai in Guangdong province, of the city of Xiamen in Fujian province, and the island province of Hainan for the Chinese government's first capitalist experiment was not a matter of chance. One of the keys was to generate symbiosis with Hong Kong and Macau, to take advantage of the experience, activity and enormous human and financial capital of those two enclaves in order to promote the development of the Chinese mainland. At the same time, if the experiment worked, it would create an integrated area that would basically facilitate the future absorption of Macau and Hong Kong, which, at that time, were not yet under Chinese sovereignty. And, as we all know today, the plan worked wonders, both economically and politically. The fact is, my friends, that Shenzhen's development model began to be replicated all over China during the 1980s and 1990s until we reach the present day, the Xi Jinping era. Xi, who is considered the most powerful Chinese president since Mao Zedong, and at the same time the leader of the economically strongest China in history, intends to try his luck with a new model of a special economic area, a model that has little to do with the one that brought success and development to China. Do you want to see it? Of course you do. So now, let's take a look at Xiong'an's new Chinese dream.
Xiong'an, Xi's model for China.
As we have already told you, the new Xiong'an area aims to break with the model of the traditional special economic areas that power the current China. Xi Jinping wants to spend obscene amounts on his gamble of a new model for the future that, according to him, will guide the next 1,000 years of socialism with Chinese characteristics.
Xi has a more convinced view of the necessity of a very large, direct state role in the economy than Deng ever did. Arthur Kreber, China researcher and managing director of Gavekal Dragonomics.
Although Xiong'an is technically a special economic area, the truth is that market criteria will not be the priority, nor will the market agents, the companies, have the leadership. No, nothing like that. It is a special zone piloted and financed entirely by the central government. A city by and for the state. In fact, as you can see in this graph, the Chinese government intends Xiong'an to be the largest public investment project in the entire history of China. But it doesn't end there. This project will not be led by private companies. It is the state that intends to pilot the process through a huge investment of public resources, none of them being orientated to international investment. And take note, because not even the real estate activity will fall to private initiative. Each and every residential complex to be built in Xiong'an will be promoted by the state, and the property will remain public, which, by the way, has very significant consequences. For example, the public monopoly on real estate activity will mean that Xiong'an will not generate the huge revenues from real estate transactions like the many billions in foreign investment injected into the development process of the Guangzhou Shenzhen area and many other economic areas dotted around the country. And, by the way, as there is no private ownership of land in China, the farmers currently working in the Xiong'an area will be immediately dispossessed, with compensation that the state will decide arbitrarily. Thousands of farmers will face serious difficulties. Not exactly a great start. By the way, one of the ironies is that living in Xiong'an will be closely linked to work. This may not sound like a bad idea at all, but there is a problem. Since the housing is state-owned, it's tied to the job, and many believe that losing your job or moving to another one outside Xiong'an will mean losing the right to live in the city as well. Even more control for the one party. But the big question is, if this macro plan has been designed without putting private initiative first, what do they intend to fund it with? What does Xi Jinping intend to be the driving force of what is being hailed as China's greatest city, perhaps even the future capital of the whole country? Well, although it may seem strange to you, the gamble is that Xiong'an will be set up to absorb the non-administrative functions of Beijing in its first stage. In this way, the Chinese government wants to move universities, public companies, hospitals, research centres and organisations of all kinds there. Everything, of course, that is state-owned or closely controlled by the state. It is even intended that private participation could take place, but only through consortiums that allow private companies to operate, but where the Chinese government always takes the lead. In other words, what Xi Jinping proposes is nothing less than to create a fort, a new city that is not based on trade or competition, but on the public sector. And he also wants it to be the emblem of the new China. Along these lines, the development plans envisage that the population of this new metropolis will grow to more than 7 million inhabitants over the next few decades, while at the same time becoming a model of sustainability. Because the Chinese president's idea is that Xiong'an will also be a green city, a kind of guinea pig on how to build urban models in a new era of low-emission companies, industries and transport, all of which may sound strange in the world's most polluting country. In any case, the first step has to be to close all factories and companies in the area that doesn't meet the new standards. Since 2017, the Chinese government has ordered the closure of more than 5,000 companies and factories in the region, and the process will continue until the area is cleaned up. Now, let's take one moment here. Many experts who have thoroughly analysed the project believe that not only will it not replicate Shenzhen's success, but there is a high risk that the city will become a complete failure. Let me explain. This idea of building a city based almost exclusively on civil servants and public money, and which is far removed from the dynamic of competition and market innovation, well, what can I say? And if we take into account whose hands are controlling the Chinese public sector, well, then the picture is even more bleak. Having said that, the question we should be asking at this point is, can a new city that is oblivious to the demands of the market succeed in 21st century China? Does it really have something unique, something groundbreaking to offer? Well, let's take a look.
Story of a predicted failure?
When we speak of failure in Chinese terms, we do not mean that the city will not be built or that it will not be a step forward for the region. Remember that this is an undeveloped rural area, and any investment in infrastructure, companies, hospitals, universities and other facilities will undoubtedly be an improvement on the original situation. However, Realistically, it is very, very likely that the model that Xi Jinping wants to test for China's future here will simply not work. The first problem is its location. Unlike Xiong'an, which is next to the financial hub of Hong Kong and also has direct access to the sea, Xiong'an is inland, in an area that is very cold in winter, warm in summer, and where living conditions are basically unpleasant. And although the infrastructure that is already being built is impressive and promises to connect the new city to Beijing in half an hour, it is not entirely clear that this will convince people to move there. At least not in the numbers that Beijing expects. In addition, let's consider the regulations that will be in place for private activities and the plans for the public sector to be the one that plays the leading role. Xiong'an may well end up becoming a boring city of public workers forcibly transferred from Beijing. Hardly a massive selling point. Xiong'an has tough competition in China itself. What would lead you to establish a business in Xiong'an if you were also able to do it, for example, in the Yangtze Delta? Now, apart from the doubts about the success of this city, or the rejection of a project that seems, in practice, nothing more than a return to old Soviet projects of the mid-20th century, ones that were designed to consolidate the power of the Communist Party elites, the truth is that the ambition of Xi Jinping and the enormous amounts of money involved could give rise to a very odd kind of city museum. An ultra-modern city that was built overnight in a place where there was little more than rice fields and very humble peasant houses.
I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't work half as successfully as China expects, but it will be more impressive than anything we've seen in the West for 50 years. Xiao Runling, urban development expert at the National Development and Reform Commission.
Be that as it may, we'll have to wait until at least 2035 to see what happens with Xiong'an. But my friends, for the moment, the bulldozers and cranes have already entered the 3 counties, and the construction of the main infrastructure is already well underway. For example, the Xiong'an Mega Train Station, which, with its 475 square meters and a cost of more than $1.1 billion, will be the central communications hub of Xiong'an. This station is expected to open its doors between the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. In any case, what is clear is that we are now facing a new experiment with a single objective: to consolidate the power of Xi Jinping and the political aristocrats of the Chinese Communist Party. Note that while Xiong'an was being launched, Xi Jinping has also announced the creation of new special economic zones. So, in itself, Xiong'an does not represent a departure from China's economic development policy, but the experiment is well underway. And now, it's over to you. Do you think the first great city of the 21st century designed to turn its back on the private sector can succeed? Is it an isolated project, or do you think it will become a point of reference for future projects in China? And how badly did I pronounce all of the Chinese names in this video? Leave your answers in the comments. As always, we really hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit like if you did, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos. Also, don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not my dulcet tones. Also, this channel is possible because of Patreon and our patrons on that platform. Please consider joining them and supporting our mission of providing independent political coverage. And, as always, I'll see you next time.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear even more of my lovely voice, you can join us at Reconsider Media. We have a podcast at reconsidermedia.com/podcast. See you there.